Alright guys, welcome back. My name's Kyun. We're going through with our 12 class all the things challenge and kind of walking through the all the things process, or the settings I should say. In this video series, this should be video number 8 where we're covering the interface and all the more or less details within it. As I'm pulling this up, kind of keep in mind that everything with this is purely preference. So, some things you may want to go through and include, some things maybe not. There's nothing really critical. There are things that are advantageous, but nothing really critical here. So the first thing is enabling the tooltip. So maybe to go through and kind of give an actual example of what that is, I'm going to close this. And when we talk about the tooltip, we're talking about the little window that's going to pop up on the bottom right hand corner. So this is actually the Brewfest at the moment, and what we're seeing is information presented from what do we call this? Presented from all the things, as far as obviously the NPC's name, the level of progression we have with respect to that NPC, and then further information as far as like creature ID, location, what it's relevant for, and then everything that we're potentially missing. So whenever we're saying tooltip, this is kind of what we're referring to for the most part. So if we go back up, just kind of make that a little bit simple, put a picture with words. So the first option is to display it in combat. For me, I would recommend it. Before we get into this, so let me backtrack a second. Sometimes for lower performing computers, you may want to turn this off. I don't know how much it would help you or not. Some people have found that it does, as far as what I've been told, in the sense that if they turn this off, the lagginess sometimes they encounter helps out. All the things can be sometimes a little bit heavy. I wouldn't let that discourage you from downloading it and giving it a shot, but some people find it a little bit where it can cause a little bit of lag. Maybe go through and turn this off if that's the case for you. I'll kind of let you kind of go through and work that out, but at least as an option, it's there. However, enabling it does allow for faster identification for whether or not there's something that you need from that particular mob, that item, the event, whatever the case may be. So you'll notice with that mob that we had talked about earlier, show the collection process. So if we go back down in the top right hand corner, you see in yellow text, very top right hand corner, 15 of 27, 55%, right? So that's more or less the progress there, and that's all that is for the most part. You can switch that out, I think, for the show the remaining things, where it just kind of goes in and does the math for you. I've never done that before. I just kind of like I like having the information of like how many we have, how many total there are, and just having that accessible. The summary of things, what was this one about? I'll be honest, I actually forgot this one. Let's see, enable this option to summarize things in a tooltip. Oh, that's right. So within the description, going back down, if we take a look at the NPC, in blue text, there we go. In blue text, you can see Lock and Thunder Brew, Brew of the Month Club, Ironforge also sells these items. Little tips like that, I keep them on because they can be very helpful. Just kind of depending on the scenario of whether or not it's whatever you're working on, whether it's archaeology, a vendor like this, or whatever the case may be. These do prove to be very helpful. So that being said, I'm going to close that and we'll make our way back this way. As far as the show coordinates, pretty simple stuff. If you have your mini list up, we've talked about that in video 1, the /att mini. It'll show the location of those critical elements in that list and their coordinates. As far as the descriptions, we've kind of talked about that a little bit, similar to the summary there as well. Let's see, as far as kind of going through and looking at this, one thing I've not selected is, if there's, say for example, know a recipe, to list all the characters that know a recipe or something along those lines in the tooltip as well. To me, I've just not found that to be useful. As long as I see a check mark next to it and I'm collecting the recipe account wide, I'm fine. That one I've just not had too much of a need for. The model preview, this one can be useful in the sense where it goes through and next to the name of the mob, it shows kind of like a preview model of that character. That's been useful before. You know, whether you're looking for a male night elf or a female gnome, that's been helpful. We talked about the remaining things, showed chair appearances. So this one I want to spend a little bit of time on here because this to me has been very helpful in the past. So we're going to kind of make up a scenario here where let's say I'm looking at the auction house, right? And I come across an item that's a zone drop in Nyalotha. And we'll say maybe Mythic Nyalotha. So if we look at this belt, you can see that it's bind on equip, right? And if you're going through and you're collecting things in unique mode, this is especially useful. So let's say if you right click on the belt, it pulls up everything this way. And what this does is show that if we look at the tooltip about midway through the text, there's 3 epic items. It's the, what do you call it? The belt of concealed intent, which is at the bottom, and then 2 other belts as well. So the reason that's important is that if we then, once we've right clicked on this, this pops up another box like this. Now we can go in and look and say, okay, this belt actually drops from the Dark Inquisitor. And again, if we look in the middle of the tooltip, you can see underneath all the stats, underneath the sell price and the blue text saying that we haven't collected it, we can see that, it drops from, with all of, ATT, drops from Dungeons and Raids, BFA, Nyalotha, Mythic, Dark Inquisitor. Likewise, we know that the belt similar to that one can also drop in Nyalotha as well from the carapace of N'Zoth. So this is really helpful in determining, for me sometimes, whether or not it's useful to buy something. So let's say that if we picked up the same belt, maybe I'll scan over these. There we go. That might, no, that doesn't, never mind. If there was an item that was unique to itself, meaning that there wasn't any shared sort of appearances, and let's say I found that item for a price I would have been willing to pay for it, I could scoop that up and be fine, and I have that appearance and that unique appearance and everything. Whereas in this scenario, where the item may be like 40,000 gold, I can kind of weigh the option saying, well, you know what? Maybe if I run Mythic Nyalotha in the future, I could potentially get this item to drop for cheaper, maybe, of course, or I can actually get it to potentially drop for my boss. So having these little tooltips in here is really, really worthwhile. This is just kind of like a one-off scenario here, where in this element, it's just a BOE and a boss drop. Many times, say for like a PvP appearance, it shares, especially the early on, it may share an appearance with a crafted item. So instead of having to go through in PvP, you could craft it, or vice versa. You know what I mean? It kind of depends on what best fits you. But the options there, nonetheless, to go through and at least say what other items share that same appearance. So if we go back, that kind of brings us to the rest of the show the class requirements, show the race requirements. I keep all this stuff just for the extra information. It's just helpful. It's just one of those things where the more information you have, normally the better. Now over here, as far as the under debugging, you could go through and check under everything here. For me though, I typically keep just the item ID, the creature ID, and then the quest givers. Reason being is that whenever I'm going through, and let's say for example I'm looking for a particular drop and I'm trying to set things up in rarity, which we can do a video for that later, but if I hover over the tooltip, let's see if I can show an example of that. So let's say for example meaty haunch here. About midway through we can see that the item ID is 154898. And that might be kind of meaningless at the moment, but let's say, for example, if we're looking for the barnacled bag that drops in Najatar, we know that there's about 4 or 5 different crabs that can drop the barnacled bag. So we would go through and then take that item ID, associate it with the creature ID, and it just saves us time from having to go on to Wowhead and figure out, what is, with the name of this mob, what's its ID? If we just hover over it, we have it. It's in game already. Um, Quest givers, this is for me kind of a nice thing whenever we're going through and trying to figure out where does a particular item or a particular appearance or whatever the case may drop from a quest giver. These are really the only things that I check. Maybe in the future, if I go through and add or take away some stuff, I'll make another video kind of presenting that. But that's kind of where that is for the most part. Let's see. As far as this goes, I'm going to try to keep these videos a little bit shorter, but I did want to go through and make sure I covered this stuff more in just like a bunch of verbiage, but actually kind of paint a picture with it. So main list, if you, depending on your computer setup and everything goes, you can actually make the font larger or smaller. I tend to keep mine at 1, but you know, going through and making it bigger, nothing wrong with it. You know, have at it. Same thing with the mini list. I don't have the mini list up at the moment, but you know, that would work at the same. That would do the same thing. As far as displaying the source locations, I keep it at 5 to just reduce the amount of text in some of these boxes. When you start getting into your PvP vendors or your PvP gear or items that are have 20 shared appearances or whatever, meaning that there's one visual appearance, but the item has like 20 different names or 20 different item IDs depending on where you get it from, whether it's an NPC, an event, some sort of quest giver. So I keep it at the default of 5. So hopefully that helps, and hopefully that gives a little bit more of a meaning of why I have things set up the way I do. If there's any sort of questions with this, feel free to let me know. I know this can be a little bit daunting at first, especially if you just don't know what everything actually means. So that being said, hopefully that helps. So until the next video, you guys be safe. I'll see you soon.